Hey dudes, it's Larold. I made over 8 divines per hour in profit running Expedition yesterday, and I'm going to give a breakdown on how to set it up, how to run Expedition correctly, and how to make this allegedly worthless league mechanic into a bona fide money printer. Against all odds, Expedition in Path of Exile 2 is actually a very good currency making mechanic, and I think it's still good mechanically as well. It's just PoE 1 Expedition, basically, so pretty great. It also doesn't require a fast build like Breach does. It doesn't require surviving for Simulacra, which takes a lot of defense, and it doesn't cost, 40 divines like buying at least 4 King of the Mist keys in order to be profitable. It can be very punishing if you're not paying attention, but as long as you read, I know, worst thing in the world, but as long as you read, it is quick and relatively painless and rewarding. So let's get into it. Expedition is good for 2 different reasons, and neither of them is really the intended gameplay loop of farming artifacts and then trading with Danig, Rog, Gwenin, and Tujen in your hideout. So Expedition is good mainly because of logbooks. Logbooks have a chance at level 79 and up to contain Olroth, the pinnacle boss of Expedition. Basically, logbooks are sort of a pinnacle boss key, but not exactly. You also have to kill Olroth to unlock the Atlas passive points for Expedition, just like you do every other League mechanic. Now, you may disagree, but I think he was the easiest of the pinnacle bosses by a lot. The only real difficulty of the fight, for me at least, was finding him in the logbooks, because he's just not that common. According to the wiki, it's around to 20% spawn rate in area level 79 plus logbooks. I think that sounds about right, yeah. Now, Olroth is a useful boss to farm because he can drop 2 very valuable uniques, and I have those pulled up here on the wiki page. One is Heroic Tragedy, a timeless jewel, and this can roll with the Varana Anoint, which gives you this keystone bonus, no icon there, but Strength's inherent bonus is 1% increased energy shield per 2 strength instead. So it's really, really good for stat stacking Chaos Inoculation builds, so it's very valuable. It's like 50 divines with this roll, and bad ones roll with they're like still 35 divines, and you can hit them with a divine and reroll them and potentially get a Varana. So there's probably a money-making strategy in just buying and rerolling these and selling them off to people who don't know or don't want to gamble. But, it is a bit of a gamble. The other valuable item that Olroth drops is Olroth's Resolve. This insanely broken life flask. It is absolutely insane, not just for Pathfinder builds, but especially for Pathfinder builds. It gives you instant recovery. It gives you a massive guard value for any excess life recovery, which winds up being a very, very, very big shield for some builds, again, especially Pathfinder, and, it's about a 25 divine life flask as well, just to kind of look at some values here. 45 divines or so for corrupted heroic tragedies in service of Varana, 50 for ones that aren't corrupted, and yeah, like 30 divines for Olroth's Resolve. Very good uniques, right? Now, because of this, high-level logbooks sell in bulk for about 85% of a divine orb each, and they drop relatively often. The other reason that Expedition is good is because the remnants within it grant large bonuses to quantity and rarity for the monsters and the treasure chests contained within the Expedition, and you can combine these together to make some very rewarding but also potentially very dangerous monsters. One important difference between PoE 1 and PoE 2's versions of Expedition is that logbooks can drop from chests in PoE 2, they cannot in PoE 1. That is something to bear in mind. So getting chests from your expeditions is actually good. I got tons of logbooks from them. Alright, so now let's talk about setup. So in terms of the setting up of the maps, I came over from here into this valley with these 3 towers here, 3 towers here, 3 towers here, and then this 1 tower over here. And I used all 10 of these towers to set up Expedition across pretty much all the maps in this area. I ran 50 maps with Expedition, I counted all the currency and valuable items I found along the way, and added it all up. The entire time I spent on the strategy, including the setup, starting all from the very beginning and so on, and even like stopping to AFK a little bit to like take notes and create a spreadsheet and so on, was about 4.5 to 5 hours. So because of that, I think 5 minutes per map is a very, very conservative estimate. Your mileage may vary based on your build, but I think 5 minutes per map is extremely doable. I also only used 8 Expedition tablets on these towers because there were a couple of them in the middle here where there just weren't enough maps around to actually get all of the, I think I had a tablet that said it'll affect 7 nearby maps with Expedition, and there were only like 2 or 3 whatever maps that were available to throw Expedition onto, and so I threw Breach onto a couple of maps as well, and honestly, I think that the Breach actually slowed me down and made me less currency per hour than I was making through Expedition. So I think if I had not bothered with Breach and done literally anything else, I think it might have even been faster and probably still made pretty close to the same amount of currency in the end. And on that note, let's go ahead and jump over to the tablets. So Expedition tablets are going to have a couple of different suffixes that are available, and there are really two, I think, that kind of stand out as being better than the rest. The first would be this one right here: increased quantity of Expedition logbooks dropped by runic monsters in your maps. This isn't a huge amount, 5 to 10%. I got 17 of them in the span of 50 maps, so if I'd had 10% more, that would maybe be one. If I had 5% more, that would be none more, right? But because of the way that towers work, you can overlap a lot of tablets that have this modifier and potentially get that multiplied. You could actually wind up doubling or even more the amount of logbooks that you get. With that being said, buying logbooks in bulk cost around 20 exalts for me, and it was actually probably the hardest part of doing this whole strategy was just getting people who understood that I was trying to buy all of their Expedition tablets at once. If you buy them in bulk on a site like a third-party tool like the TFT Discord, you're going to pay a pretty big premium for them, especially based on this number right here. The actual implicit, the number of maps that contain Expedition encounters is going to play a huge role in how expensive a tablet is, basically. Like this one with 5 maps probably won't cost, that much because it's only applying 5 expeditions. But if I have any here that have 10, this one might be twice or 3 times more expensive. The market on buying tablets in bulk that actually have specific roles on them is a little questionable. I've definitely seen a lot of people trying to bulk sell one tablet at a time. It makes no sense, right? Now, with that being said, the other good suffix here is this one right here. Expeditions in your maps have an extra remnant. If you're able to get a few of these stacked up and a few of the quantity of Expedition logbooks dropped by runic monsters stacked up, that could have a pretty big multiplicative effect on the amount of stuff that you get out of your expeditions. I didn't really bother that hard with it. I just simply tried to get Expedition onto the maps, and then if I got anything like the quantity of logbooks or quantity of items or more rare Expedition monsters or anything like that, I just kind of looked at that as gravy. Like, that's just a bonus. Pretty much everything was just simply, can I even get Expedition onto the maps in the first place? And then whatever else happens, happens. Now, as for the maps, I had a bunch of maps that I had rolled and gotten quantity onto, and then again, whatever other mods were on there. Maybe it was all prefixes, maybe it was 8 or 10 mods, maybe it was just a regular 6 mod map. Again, who cares? It was just simply they had quantity on them, and more importantly, they had no delirium. That has actually been a nice change of pace. I did find that the maps were a little bit faster and a little less painful without delirium on them, and then also just the game is really beautiful when it's not being covered in a horrible cloud of delirium fog. So none of these maps were super special. They did all have quantity on them, but that is literally the only requirement I had. They just had quant, and then who cares what else, right? All right, this is me in the edit. Thinking about this a little bit more, I do think pack size would be good. Pack size is fantastic for PoE 1 expedition, so I think pack size would be a pretty great mod. More rare monsters also would be good. Anything that adds more guides is going to add more chances to get more logbooks, so that would be good. But ultimately, all I cared about was quant, and it worked. It worked fine. There's probably more room for optimization, and I would encourage it. And then finally, the last little bit of setup here, I am using this as my Atlas passive tree, the same basic Atlas passive tree as I have it for the last couple of farm strategies. I am using local knowledge. You could drop that in place of precursor influence instead. This would get you some more precursor tablets, which actually would add up to be a little bit of currency. Might wind up being better than local knowledge, maybe, kind of up to you. I have made one change to my bossing tree, not that this is a huge value add, but I did have a couple of people mention that instead of taking Fit for a King, actually taking Beyond Reality and giving your maps that have a boss in them a chance to contain corruption can actually be good in synergy with other mechanics. You get a little bit more chance to have increased map level on the maps. That can actually be good for if you're doing something like Breach or, in this case, Expedition on the map. Where you run into a map that has a map boss on it. Now the map's a little bit more rewarding, so I did actually change my map bossing around based on that. Don't know that it had any effect, but I like to think that it did. So I kind of like that setup a little bit more than just getting a little bit better stuff off the bosses. And then this is the Expedition tree. Now the stuff that is absolutely non-negotiable is Disturbed Rest. You get 50% more runic monster markers. That is not negotiable at all. And Detailed Records, you get You get more logbooks, again, non-negotiable. You must take these two. There is no way that you can make an optimal strategy that doesn't have these two notables in it. The other two notables, kind of up to you. I do think this is a strategy you could start doing even just at 2 notable points and like kind of pushing. It's not like I was really doing a lot of juicing. I was just simply trying to have Expedition in the map. So you could do Expedition with no points in and work your way toward getting logbooks to farm up to unlock detailed records and then continue doing that. That would definitely work. But I think the best combination of 3rd and 4th notable points are Weight of History for 35% increased effective remnants, and then Unearthed Anomalies so that your remnants will have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. Now this is not like a doubling of difficulty. This is because of the way that the suffix modifiers interact with each other in your remnants. This is more like a 10x multiplier on difficulty if you're not paying attention. You can often run into remnants that will have like increased like 100% extra monster damage as lightning, and then also monsters penetrate 40% of your lightning resistance. And you multiply that across a couple of different remnants, and you're basically just creating a monster that can hit you for like a couple 100,000 damage, right? So you really, so much more than normal Expedition, you really have to be paying attention if you go for Unearthed Anomalies. Now, because of that, it is more rewarding. There is a lot more potential to get a lot more reward out of coming down here and taking Weight of History and Unearthed Anomalies, but you don't have to, right? You could just take Time Detonations, which isn't very good. It gives you more artifacts, which right now artifacts are pretty worthless. Could be good in the future, though. And then Legendary Battles will give you 50% increased rare Expedition monsters, which is actually very good. More rare monsters means, just like with detailed records, it does mean more logbooks. So Legendary Battles is very good, and then 50% increased quantity of exotic coinage is actually also pretty good. So I think that Time Detonations is pretty worthless. I played around with Extreme Archaeology when I was only at 6 points prior to making this video, and I actually think it's kind of bad in PoE 2. I think the radius on it is not nearly as good as it is in PoE 1, but maybe if you use tablets to increase the radius, you get some of those for cheap or just self-farm them. Maybe Extreme Archaeology could be okay, but I think generally speaking, I would go for Time Detonations and Legendary Battles if I'm trying to play it a little safe, I'm a little worried about my defenses or don't want to pay attention, and Weight of History and Unearthed Anomalies if I really want to juice. Alright, so in terms of how to correctly run Expedition, what you want to do is once you find the Expedition, you want to check all the remnants around the area, you want to check the monster markers and the chest markers. Then you want to try to hit the valuable remnants first and tag monsters and chests later on in the explosion chain so that the valuable remnants will, apply to the monsters and the chests, right? So what are the good remnant mods? Runic Monsters Are Duplicated is the best mod by far. It doubles all the monsters, which means twice as many chances to get logbooks and currency. Increased logbook drop chance is also obviously very good. Quantity of items is great. Pack size and more monsters is pretty good, and I think that's pretty much it. Everything else is kind of whatever. Rarity is not actually that great. You can actually get some pretty good normal bases from monster drops, and rarity kind of prevents that from happening. Rarity isn't bad, it's just not amazing. You also want to be sure not to combine too many bad remnant mods. That's really the most important thing to keep track of. Adding extra elemental damage and elemental penetration of the same type, that example I used before, is pretty much an immediate recipe for death. You want to be super cautious with build disabling mods. Monsters are immune to a type of ailment or immune to a type of damage. You really want to be careful of that. And it's always a good idea before you hit the explosion button just to kind of check the mods, read through the list, and make sure you don't have anything you can't do, and just never really try to do too much. All right, with that all out of the way, let's talk about the results. Let's talk about the currency. This is the tab full of currency and stuff that I got out of doing all of these maps. 50 maps, and also the setup. It took me about, like I said, 4.5 to 5 hours, and this is roughly 36.5 divines, a little bit more than that. Now, I think this actually took me, especially if I removed any of the AFK time and the setup, I think this would put me around 4 hours, but I think taking the setup out of the equation is pretty unethical, so we're not going to do that. I did create a spreadsheet here, used my old PoE 1 spreadsheet format here, and I do have a link to the tree as well. I'll put a link to the spreadsheet in the description of the video, and the expenses are incredibly low. That's something that's kind of fun and interesting about PoE 2's mapping as opposed to PoE 1. The cost, the tablets cost about 20 exalts each, so I used 10 of them, so that's, it's 200 exalts, but then the maps, these were all self-farmed, self-rolled. I could have said that they were free. I could have said that they were more. It's kind of whatever. I think counting them all as like just a simple 3 exalts a piece is fine because I didn't even count any of the maps that I farmed. And as you can see, I farmed a lot of maps. I was like maybe a third of the way through this quad tab, and now I am over 2/3 of the way through this quad tab just off of the 50 maps that I ran. And then I also farmed, like a third of this regular size tab full of delirious maps. So I've probably farmed, I don't know, like 250, 300 maps in the span of this time. So that's probably like another 4 divines. So probably closer to like 40 divines. Rather than the like 36 or so that I am counting, and I'm okay with like just kind of letting that slide, right? So I went through and I priced everything out based on the current exalt price. That can change. Don't yell at me if it does. That's just kind of how it goes. But that is how I have priced everything out: the divines, the annuls, the greater jewelers, the raw exalts that dropped, the chaos orbs, the chances, and so on. I did, like I said, I did put breach onto some of the maps. Not nearly as many as you'd think. I actually think I had 2, maybe 3 maps that had like a massive number of breaches in them for whatever reason. So I wound up getting, I had one map where I got over 1.5 breach stones out of it. It was a very, very crazy, very long map. Like it really added a lot of time. But I did wind up with 4 breach stones, which seems like a lot, but it really only winds up being like all the breach stones, and I didn't even include any of the breach catalysts and the 2 breach tablets that I got out of the deal that were like well rolled. All of that combined to be less than 5 divines out of the 36 or so that I farmed. So I really didn't think it actually wound up being, like I said, that big of a deal. And if anything, maybe it actually kind of slowed me down because I did feel that most of the maps where I just had Expedition on the map, or Expedition and a boss or something, went very, very quickly, like 3 minutes or less. And then the maps where I would have Expedition were closer to 4.5 to 5 minutes, actually did kind of slow things down. So I estimated my time per map is around 5 minutes per map. And then with all of these values here, the logbook, 17 logbooks being worth 0.85 divines each, that's 3,757 exalts in total, quite a bit. But somebody will definitely snap those up very quickly. Some other things in here that are valuable: the exotic coinage is actually worth a good bit, about 2.75 exalts a piece. That's pretty good. Exotic coinage, actually not bad. Most of the artifacts are pretty worthless. There is something weird going on here in the currency exchange where sun artifacts are worth less than black scythe, but you could trade sun artifacts at Danig for black scythe, so that doesn't make any sense. So I just counted them as the same price. But then the broken circle and the order artifacts, I picked up 264 order artifacts and 192 broken circle, and those combined to be less than 25 exalts. All of this is less than 25 exalts. I picked it up to see how many dropped. That's how many dropped. Was it worth picking them up? Absolutely not. And then I think the other 2 kind of notable things are, I did do rituals as I came across them. I did every mechanic as I came across it. The one thing I got from ritual that was good at all, I think I got like 2 raw exalts as well, whoop-de-doo. And then I did get an Omen of Amelioration, which is worth, what is that, like 150 exalts? All right, so 150 exalts from, I don't know, like 5-10 rituals across the 50 maps, that's fine. And then 4 white stellar amulets. These are worth about 3/4 of a divine a piece if you sell them in bulk, and you could sell 4 of them for 3 divines very quickly and easily. So I counted that as 3 divines as well. And then the tablets, I bought them for 20 a piece in bulk, and I think that's fine, right? I bought 8 and 2, and then I found 8 and 2. That works out. That really is like it's just so, but that is real. I really did find exactly what I spent. So it is what it is. All right, so now the last thing to really mention here is just simply how to sell the logbooks. I think you can sell them in-game through trade. I think you just type in, $, dollar symbol, or whatever currency symbol. I think you'll be able to sell those pretty easily. Yep, see, I see people looking for them right now. So you could sell them in-game through trade. You might wind up having to, sell them for a little less if you want to do it that way. You can also use, I know there are a lot of third-party tools. I don't necessarily recommend any, but I will say that the one that I will probably wind up using is the TFT Discord, the Forbidden Trove, and I'll just probably be going there and looking at the bulk expedition want to sell tab and just posting my stuff there and trying to sell it there. That's usually where I sell stuff. Again, no formal recommendation of anything. You can do whatever you like, but that is usually where I do it because that's what I'm used to. All right, so final question here about Expedition. Is it good? Yes, this may surprise people who don't have experience with PoE 1, but Expedition is actually considered the most consistently rewarding, the best new player friendly league mechanic in that game. It is actually very surprising that Expedition vendors in PoE 2 are so weak in the initial design of the game thus far. I would expect that to change dramatically in the next big patch, whenever that is, whether that's later this month, not a lot of days left for that, or maybe sometime in March or something. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it. This is a very fun farm strategy. I really enjoyed it. I liked not doing Delirium. I think it may have made a little bit more currency if I'd done Delirium, but it might have been slower. It might have actually been worse in terms of efficiency. I think if I had to change anything about this, I think I just wouldn't have bothered with Breach. I did make, like I said, a little bit of currency out of Breach, but it was a little boring. I don't really love picking up all those splinters that are worth less than 1 exalt each. That's a little annoying. And the pop of a logbook dropping is just very satisfying. It's pretty much right on par with a divine dropping, and this is definitely a farm strategy that will be going into my repertoire. I think a full logbook breakdown would probably be pretty fun to do as well, but that's definitely a subject that deserves its own video. Whenever GGG gets around to buffing Expedition's other components, the interacting with the vendors, that would be definitely a good upgrade for this as a strategy. I expect Expedition to get a real uptick in usage whenever that happens. That will probably cause other big shifts in the economy, but that might be part of a new league, at which point we'd be getting a new economy anyways. Alright, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it. We're getting pretty close to 20,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone for us. And if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching and have fun digging around in the dirt. Bye.